Nara emerged from hyperspace at the appointed coordinates. This was deep space, nothing to see within a half-dozen light years, but there was something awaiting them. A barrage of comm messages. They flooded the communications waves, repeating variations on the same message, overlapping one another. Greetings, Hawkbats. This is Greetings, Hawkbats. Warlord Zsinj, not rebroadcast. I welcome. This is you. Prepare to receive them. Simply Warlord Zsinj. A new set of I welcome. Follow them. Coordinates. Do not rebroadcast. You prepare them simply. Soon we follow them. To receive soon we will be a new dining in comfort, instead of dining in coming to terms of coordinates, to great mutual comfort and profit. The words continued in that way, a ceaseless stream. Face shook his head. Well, that's a mess. Let's see if we can lock them down to a single transmission. His hands moved over the communications console. All right, we have a small satellite dead ahead. One signal's stronger than the others, and that gives us... He punched a button to isolate the signal. Greetings, Hawkbats. This is Warlord Zsinj. I welcome you. Prepare to receive a new set of coordinates. Do not rebroadcast them. Simply follow them. Soon we will be dining in comfort and coming to terms of great mutual profit. The message began to repeat. We're getting a file on the same band. Don't bring it up, Kell said. It might be the kind of program Caston likes to work up. Something that will give them more information about us than we'd like. Face nodded. Good point. It's not a big file. I'll transmit it to my datapad and we can re-enter the nav data by hand. What do you figure would happen if we did want to retransmit the file?
One of two things. That satellite will have an extra system. Either it's a weapons system designed to destroy us, or it's a hypercom system that will warn Zsinj before we get to him.
Kell dragged his hair back over his shoulder again. It'll be whichever system is cheaper. Well, in either case, we won't be doing that. Face compared the navigational data on his datapad with that which he'd just typed into Nara's computer. It matched. He punched the execute button and nodded for Dia to bring the shuttle around to its new course. All right, stage 2. The main doors to Iron Fist's false bridge rose with their customary startling speed, and General Melvar entered. He stopped short at the sight of the dinner table, now occupying the center of the command walkway. Zsinj was seated at the head chair of the bare table, his booted feet up on it. Behind him, at the bow end of the chamber, the holoscreens had been activated and were now a perfect match for the view from the real bridge's forward viewports. They framed Zsinj, making him the central feature of the galaxy they showed. Zsinj smiled at him. What do you think? Perhaps your most ostentatious demonstration yet, Melvar said as he approached. Shouldn't you surround yourself with a nimbus of light to complete the effect? Not a bad idea. Maybe next time. What do you want? Sensors have reported a shuttle's appearance from the hyperspace course you provided to the Hawkbats. They'll be here within minutes. Zsinj's feet hit the walkway surface and he stood. Assemble the cast. Notify the galley. And get into makeup. This should be entertaining. As he watched Iron Fist growing in the forward viewport, Face willed his stomach to quit crawling around. All right, here's your last bit of advice. Remember, we're just as arrogant as they are, but nowhere near as strong. So, respond appropriately to bad manners, but not so appropriately that you get us killed. Kell mimed entering data on an imaginary datapad. No get killed, he said. I'll try to remember. I'd like to say leave all the talking to me, but that's not going to work. We're here to impress them with our individual skill and readiness. Just keep all your responses in character, and refer any question about our unit strength, tactical readiness, that sort of thing to me. Understood, General, Dia said. Her voice was an insinuating purr, far different from the flat, sometimes emotionless tones he was used to from her. He glanced at her, and it was a stranger's face that looked back at him. Dia's features with another woman behind them. Her eyes evaluated him with the steady regard of a half-tamed animal watching its owner for some sign of weakness. He looked away quickly, uneasily aware that he didn't know whether she was simply a natural actress or this was a layer to her that he hadn't seen before. To his disappointment, the Iron Fist bridge crew instructed the Hawkbats to land in a secondary hangar well forward of the main hangar. He would have liked to have seen the damage done to the main hangar by Kell's tanker bomb, to have seen its state of repair. Dia brought the shuttle into the designated hangar. Within already were a pair of interceptors, another Lambda-class shuttle, and a larger Raptor transport shuttle, an ugly, boxy troop carrier known to be favored by Zsinj's forces, and a reception committee, an officer and a half-dozen stormtroopers. One of the troopers hand-guided Nara to a landing pad marked off by red paint. Dia set the shuttle down expertly. Showtime, Face said. They descended the boarding ramp in proper form, Face first, Dia and Kell to either side of and behind him. Face stopped directly before the officer. Neither that man nor any of the stormtroopers reacted visibly to Face's scar makeup, the first time he could remember such a lack of response. The officer before him was not what Face had expected. The man was tall and lean, with features that might have been bland, had they not been twisted into such a predatory smile. He seemed to glow with an inner light, and Face suspected that it was a dangerous light. The man liked to win, or to kill, or to inflict pain. Face wasn't sure which, but he did know that this was a man to watch. The officer also, incongruously, had long and perfectly reflective fingernails. Face suspected they were metal, and would not have been surprised to discover that they were very, very sharp. Face cleared his throat. I am General Kargan, founder and leader of the Hawkbat Independent Space Force. He put on an urbane smile and lowered his voice. I believe I have an invitation. Indeed you do. General Melvar, I'm in charge of the Warlord's assault forces, and I welcome you to Iron Fist. The general shook Face's hand. Firm grip, fast shake. He made no effort to conduct a contest of grip strength to demonstrate dominance. Your associates? Face gestured first to Dia, then to Kell. Captain Seku, my second in command. Lieutenant Dissek, my bodyguard. Delighted. Before we continue, though, there is a bit of bureaucratic unpleasantness to accomplish. Oh? The general looked regretful. Zsinj is a man with many enemies. For this reason, many policies surround him, policies that I do not let him overrule for his own safety. One of them leads me to insist that you turn over all weapons to my men for the duration of your stay. Face shrugged. Then he drew his blaster pistol with such speed that the stormtroopers present were caught off guard, their weapons out of line. He could have shot Melvar and one or two others before they would have been able to react. But just as quickly, he flipped the blaster in the air and caught it, then handed it butt first to the nearest stormtrooper. "I have no fear of treachery here," Face said. "Alive, I promise additional strength to Zsinj. Killed, I would cost him very dearly." Melvar gave him a polite nod and shrug, neither agreeing to nor denying Face's assertion. Dia and Kell handed over their own blasters in a less dramatic fashion. "The second part of this unfortunate protocol," Melvar said, "is that you must be scanned for additional weapons you might have forgotten to hand over, because of your habitual wearing of them almost as clothing rather than weapons. Please." Obligingly, Face and the others raised their arms and let a stormtrooper specialist run a handheld scanner around them. Face came up clean, then Dia. Then it was Kell's turn. His accoutrements also failed to trigger the weapons scanner, but the stormtrooper behind him obviously thought his arms needed to be a little higher. With the barrel of his blaster rifle, he tapped the underside of one of Kell's arms to raise it. Kell stepped back so that the stormtrooper's barrel protruded beneath his right arm. He clamped his right arm upon it, then twisted, simultaneously yanking the blaster out of the man's hand and bringing his elbow up under the stormtrooper's helmet. A slight change to the angle of his attack, and the blow would crush the man's windpipe. But Kell instead brought his elbow up into the man's chin. Everyone heard the crack of the man's jaw snapping shut. The stormtrooper dropped to the floor, his armor clattering. The other stormtroopers aimed at Kell. With admirable aplomb, Kell slowly reached over to switch off the blaster rifle's power, then lowered the weapon onto its fallen owner. "Is there a problem?" General Melvar's mouth twitched into what looked like an amused smirk. "You appear to be punishing one of my men." "Punishing?" Kell looked down at the stormtrooper as if seeing him for the first time. "Oh, I assure you no punishment was intended. That was simply reflex. If I'd intended to punish him, he'd be begging you to kill him now." Face turned back to Melvar. "My apologies." The general shook his head. "No need to apologize. The trooper was not instructed to behave this way toward honored guests. I think a little experience with electricity will do him some good." He gestured to another stormtrooper to attend to the unconscious man, then for Face to fall in step beside him. "How much do you pay for this man Dissec's services?" "I'll never tell," Face said. "If you want to try to hire him away, you'll have to offer him a bribe without knowing my own economies." Melvar offered a little sigh of vexation. General Melvar and the Hawkbats swept into a bridge that was a riot of activity. A narrow but full-length dinner table, large enough to accommodate 20 people, was set up on the command walkway and more than half filled with diners. Seated at the head of the table, his back to the viewports now showing the swirl of hyperspace travel, a vast area of brightness in his spotless white Grand Admiral's uniform, was Zsinj. His hands were clasped over his expansive belly, his mustachios drooped rakishly, and his expression was one of great contentment. The officers assembled at his table were engaged in vigorous conversation, but as the Hawkbats entered the chamber, they could hear none of it. It was drowned out by the din from the crew pit below. There, uniformed bridge officers stood their watches with a startling unconcern for military decorum. Some monitored their screens while leaning back with their feet up on their consoles. Others stood in groups of 3 or 4, eyes on their screens but their attention on their fellows. Several crewmen were huddled close to their screens, absorbed in low-grade TIE fighter simulators. At one point toward the bow,
Two stormtroopers were engaged in a vibroblade duel, apparently a friendly one, but their blows still caused deep scores in their white armor. They were all talking, a jumble of noise that made the chamber sound like a conference hall rather than a ship's bridge. General Melvar led the Hawkbats toward the head of the table and had them sit before offering introduction.
Warlord, allow me to present you General Kargan, Captain Seku, and Lieutenant Disick, honored representatives of the Hawkbats. General Kargan, your host, the Warlord Zsinj.
Face offered a seated half-bow. Zsinj finally turned his attention to the new guests and smiled.
Good to meet you at last. Welcome aboard Iron Fist. A formidable vessel. I trust we did not do her too much damage.
Certainly not. Oh, several such explosions would have been most inconvenient, but our capacity for repair is unparalleled.
Face drew a hand across his brow, an exaggerated demonstration of relief.
Well, that's cause for us to celebrate. I have no qualms about preying on ground pounders like the people of Halmad, but, and it costs me no honor to say it, I would avoid earning the prolonged enmity of Zsinj.
The warlord's smile became broader.
It was already obvious that you were an intelligent pirate, else you would not have enjoyed the success you did. But before we get to our main subject of conversation for the evening, let us dine.
Please. Face knew he'd kept all tension from his voice and manner, but it was still there. And the meal was one more opportunity for Zsinj to visit some new difficulty upon them, such as poison. If they'd read the man correctly, there would be no such subterfuge here. But they could always have made a mistake in their evaluation. Face was actually enjoying his main course, some sort of fowl in a sunfruit marinade, and idly hoping it wasn't poisoned, when Zsinj asked a question he wasn't prepared for.
Am I mad, General Kargan, or do you have an Ewok pilot in your unit?
Face froze. He swallowed and hastily cleared his throat.
What leads you to that conclusion, sir?
Intercepted transmissions.
Analysis of the vocal characteristics of your pilot, Hawkbat 1, suggests that he was probably, though not definitely, an Ewok. But I don't understand how that could be possible.
Face shrugged and ran through a mental list of a dozen different possible responses.
Well, he is an Ewok, mostly an Ewok, Lieutenant Ketch. My most ferocious pilot, actually. He can't really reach the controls, but a somewhat crooked prosthetics expert on Tatooine built him a set of hand and leg extensions he can wear, so his height has not limited him in the least.
Obviously, but I thought Ewoks were far too primitive to handle complex machinery or astronautics theory and practice. Too primitive even to learn an adequate vocabulary in basic.
They are, but Ketch was modified. We don't know where or why it happened. He was taken from the sanctuary moon of Endor as a cub, reared in a laboratory somewhere, and fed chemicals that apparently increased his ability to learn. He's a genius, especially with mathematics.
That was, in fact, the true background of Piggy, and Face was suddenly very glad to have it on hand as a resource. Zsinj and Melvar exchanged a glance, and Face suddenly felt his heart race. There was something in their expressions, as brief as that glance was, that told Face this subject was of vital interest to them. What did it mean?
Anyway, Face continued, he has a very nasty disposition. I wouldn't care to bring him to you, even if you'd asked about him in your earlier communications. He bites strangers. I'd hate to have him tear away a mouthful of Zsinj, and for the rest of us to be spaced for his bad manners.
Once again jovial, Zsinj turned his smile on face.
Very amusing. Still, I hope to see him fly sometime. Perhaps even a practice run against our best pilot.
Face looked around.
Is he here? Baron Fell? No, he's on duty.
The warlord shrugged.
Not the most congenial of dinner guests in any case.
So he bites too?
Zsinj laughed.
Now,
Zsinj said over the iced pastry that was their dessert course,
to the matter which has led to our meeting.
Face sat back, assuming a false expression of contentment.
Please. I am about to embark on a mission. It will be a large-scale military engagement. You're going to attack your rebel enemies. That's correct. I anticipate starfighter and capital ship response and need all the starfighter support I can get, especially considering my recent squadron losses.
He made a growl of that last statement.
But if you're as effective against my enemies as you have been against me, I will have lost effectively no strength.
An aide appeared over his shoulder and whispered to him. His expression did not change, but he rose.
I must attend to business for a few moments. Melvar, please continue this briefing.
He took a few steps away with the aide. Melvar smiled, an expression that suggested he'd be happiest if pulling the wings off insects.
It's an orbital refueling and trade station. In its warehouses is a considerable quantity of material we need, critical supplies. We also need some time to load that material into our cargo vessels. Not a lot of time, but enough time for the planetary defenses below to begin sending up squads of starfighters from the surface, and to bring in more squadrons from capital ships arrayed around the planet.
Face whistled.
You're after valuable cargo. What is it?
Melvar shook his head.
That's a secret, until you're at the mission site.
What we need to know, Zsinj said, returning to his seat, is how many starfighters you can bring to bear in support of this mission.
6,
Face said. He noted that Zsinj's merry demeanor now seemed forced.
Only 6. We fight like 20.
You fight like 30, and we'll pay you like 30.
Meaning?
Your commission is 400,000 Imperial credits, deliverable immediately upon completion of the mission.
Face tried to keep from displaying the surprise he felt. That was a fortune, enough to purchase 2 X-Wings plus replacement supplies.
And if your mission fails, no payment at all?
No, you get the entire amount regardless, assuming you don't let me die in the engagement.
I'm still impressed. If I didn't know my unit's skills, I would suspect you were overpaying us.
Zsinj dropped his false smile.
I am overpaying. I predict that some of yours, and some of mine, will die in this engagement. I intend to pay enough that all our pilots go into battle eager to succeed, happy to risk their lives, and comforted that if they die, their widows and children will be amply compensated.
Face considered it.
I'd be happy to earn still more. I have more Hawkbats than I do starfighters, many with technical proficiency, many with other skills.
Intrusion skills?
Face smiled.
I was right. You're going to position a team before your fleet arrives.
Zsinj shrugged.
We obviously think alike. Yes, of course. I have intrusion experts, some with experience with both Imperial and New Republic systems.
And also, Melvar interrupted, you have him.
He extended one silvery nail toward Kell.
And his teacher,
Face said. Melvar looked surprised. His teacher? Kell brushed his hair back, his signature gesture, and looked miffed.
His teacher. Deadliest unarmed combatant I ever met. A woman deceptively sweet of appearance, which makes it easy to insert her in most environments. Not his equal as a pilot, but I once saw her kill a Wookiee unarmed.
Zsinj and Melvar exchanged glances. Zsinj said,
Surely you're exaggerating.
He's not, Kell said, his first words since they sat. A Wookiee's incredibly strong by human standards, but no faster, and has just as many vulnerabilities. Pressure points, joints. You can't wrestle with one, that's automatic death. And its longer reach means you constantly have to drop in and out of its range. But it can be done. Katya, that's my teacher, started with a shot to the spine that compressed its spinal cord and apparently damaged a couple of its vertebrae, all of which partially paralyzed it, especially its legs. The next time it swung at her, she trapped its hand at a position to give her advantageous leverage, then twisted it to break its wrist. She broke 2 of its fingers then, too, just for fun. You know how women are. Then...
Disick, please.
Face made his voice admonishing, but inwardly was pleased by Kell's improvisation. It was just the sort of gruesome detail he would not have felt knowledgeable enough to provide.
Do forgive him. Combat is his only love.
Quite all right, Zsinj said.
You will provide me with dossiers on the Hawk Bats who have technical skills so I can evaluate possible roles for them? I will. Just give me a way to send them to you. Melvar will give you a set of holonet times and frequencies before you leave. And as much data as you can give us on this mission, so we can run our own simulations.
Melvar produced a datapad from a pocket and slid it over to him.
Would you be averse to a small commission now? The Warlord asked. Not at all.
Zsinj stared back toward the security foyer, the route by which the Hawkbats had entered the command center. 2 stormtroopers there were advancing, dragging a 3rd stormtrooper backward between them. The 3rd man was limp in their arms and had no helmet on. His hair was golden blonde.
I must be sure of your ruthlessness, Zsinj said. I know you are capable of killing in fair combat, but I want men, oh yes, and women, who can kill under less adverse circumstances. So if you'd please shoot this man for me.
The stormtroopers dumped their human cargo by the foot of the table. The man they had carried was Castan Don. His eyes were closed. There was a blaster burn mark on his right leg. His chest rose and fell in regular rhythm. Face swallowed the bile that tried to crawl up his throat and hoped that he had not gone as pale as he felt.
Castan, you idiot, you've killed us all.
Kell glanced down at Castan and then at Face, admirably keeping his features emotionless. His look was a question. Jump Zsinj now or wait? Dia kept her gaze on Castan's face, her own expression oddly enrapt.
Not much of a target,
Face said, stalling. There had to be something he could do without revealing their hand, some way to preserve all their lives without managing to jettison their entire mission. Nothing came to mind.
True, Zsinj said. Would you shoot him, please? Oh, I should imagine, Face said, but did not move. It seems rather a costly test for you, though, having us shoot one of your own stormtroopers. Not one of mine, said Zsinj. An intruder. You're not going to question him?
Zsinj shook his head.
I'm not interested in what he has to say. Would you shoot him, please?
Face clamped down on the panic rising within him. The ship's officers at the table were watching him with increasing interest. and no plan was coming to mind.
Of course,
Face said.
how much?
Zsinj looked surprised.
What? How much to shoot him? How much are you paying? General Kargan, you surprise me. You're already here, and the cost of a single pistol blast is negligible, especially as we are providing the blaster.
He nodded toward one of the officers who produced a blaster pistol.
You can't do this as a demonstration of goodwill? Intelligent life is the most precious commodity in the galaxy,
Face said, making his voice pompous.
Consequently, I never take it without adequate financial reward.
Dia stood, her sudden motion startling everyone at the table. She smiled at the warlord, a heart-melting expression, and said in her husky Seku voice, "The general is just looking out for the well-being of his officers and troops, warlord. He can't abandon his policies. They're written up in the Articles of the Hawkbats. But I can do this for you as a private commission. The blaster, please." She held out her hand. Face felt a sudden surge of elation. She had a plan. He saw Kell bring his legs up under him. The big man would probably go after Zsinj. That left General Melvar for Face, with Dia to hold the others at bay with the blaster, assuming they gave her a functional one. Melvar nodded. His officer handed Dia the blaster pistol. She checked the charge, moved over beside Caston, and shot him in the throat. A chatty junior officer, apparently cheered by the murder of the intruder, led the Hawkbats back to their shuttle. Once the security foyer doors closed behind them, Zsinj rose. He clapped his hands, and all the talk in the room ceased.
"You've done very well," the warlord said. "Thank you for a fine performance."
The men saluted and began filing out of the ersatz crew pit. Zsinj sat.
"How is, what's his name, Yorlin?"
Melvar's features relaxed and became bland and non-threatening once more.
"That man Disick hit him hard enough to give him a concussion and damage some teeth." "Well, he's to be commended for following orders, even at the cost of considerable pain. Give him a commendation, and when he gets out of the medical ward, give him a 3-day leave."
He nodded at the body of the intruder. Smoke still rose from what was left of its neck.
"Hand that over to our technicians. I want to know who he was, where he came from, where he's been living, and how he got aboard Iron Fist, since he appears not to have been one of the Hawkbats after all." "Done. What did the intruder cost us?" "Initial reports indicate that he shot 2 stormtroopers and 2 technicians. Then our best Tal specimen killed another 2 technicians and another stormtrooper. And finally, the remaining troopers shot the Tals. Costly." Zsinj fixed Melvar with a serious stare. "Have we lost an Ewok test subject?" "Not from Iron Fist. But it could be that one of the planet-bound laboratories has lost one and covered up the loss." "I'm going to have to execute someone for that, Melvar. Find out who lost him, then kill that idiot." "Yes, sir."